For more now, let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. She is in Warsaw covering the president's visit. Nancy, what are the big takeaways from the president's address?
Well, Ali, the president tried to tell all of Russia and Europe, anyone watching this speech, that this is likely to be a prolonged conflict. And he said he wants to steel the European people, the Polish people, the Ukrainian people for the possibility that this is going to go on for a while and that NATO needs to remain united, united in the sanctions that it has placed on Russia, united in its commitment to provide humanitarian aid to Poland, which has seen an influx of more than 2 million refugees from Ukraine, and committed to providing more weaponry to the Ukrainians who have been fighting back against this Russian invasion. He also, Ali, tried to sort of put this current conflict into a larger perspective, arguing that this is just the latest example of Russia trying to exert dominance over countries that are simply seeking more freedoms, simply seeking democracy. And he pointed to the Polish people. He's here in Warsaw saying this is something that the Polish people know a lot about. And it didn't happen overnight. They sort of had to fight for years in order to rid themselves of Soviet domination. And he pointed out that many other countries have experienced something similar.
And Nancy, Ukraine has been pushing for the U.S. and NATO to increase their military assistance and do more to punish Russia. President Biden finally met with Ukrainian leaders in person this weekend. What do we know about their meeting, and was Ukraine able to walk away with what it wanted?
Well, this is a really remarkable meeting. If you think about it, you had the foreign minister of Ukraine, the defense minister of Ukraine leaving that country, which is something that is risky and rare for them to do, simply because they had the opportunity to sit down face to face with the leader of the free world, President Biden, here in Warsaw, about 130 miles from the Ukrainian border. Now, he knows pretty well at this point what it is they're seeking, because U.S. officials are in daily contact with Ukrainian officials about various weapon systems they'd like to see more of. And of course, we know that they're looking for more NATO tanks. They're looking for jets. Those are things that have been a lot harder to come by for the Ukrainians. But this is really an opportunity for him to talk to them face to face about what they're experiencing, what their needs are, and for him to reassure them that the U.S. is going to be on their side. And in fact, those two ministers attended the president's speech here in Warsaw as well. He made sure to mention that they were sitting there in the audience and talked about the fact that the U.S. is going to remain on the side of the Ukrainians.
And President Biden discussed the importance of NATO continuing to act as a unified group. Have any of NATO's plans changed with the president's visit?
Well, one thing that the president has talked about a lot here in Europe is the need to wean European countries off of Russian oil and gas. So many countries here in Europe depend on Russia for 50% or more of their energy needs. And that's the kind of thing that's very difficult to change overnight. And yet it is critical to being able to put more of an economic squeeze on Vladimir Putin to show him that one of his biggest exports, oil and gas, simply cannot survive if he doesn't change course. And so the president announced a new initiative to provide Europe with more liquefied natural gas. And Germany, really one notable example, put out a very aggressive timeline saying that it thinks it can wean itself entirely off of Russian gas in the next 2 years. Now, obviously, 2 years is a long time, especially when we are counting the days in this conflict one at a time. But it does show that there is a commitment here in Europe to trying to reduce reliance on Russian oil and gas. And when the president talked about that in his speech here in Warsaw, it was one of the biggest applause lines.
And we know the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pushing for the establishment of a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Is there any movement on that?
None at all. I mean, this is something that President Biden and the NATO alliance have been unified about. They fear that if they were to go ahead and impose a no-fly zone using U.S. jets, using NATO jets, that would potentially bring them into direct conflict with Russia and create an even larger war with more casualties. So they've been very, very reluctant to do that. Interestingly, another thing that U.S. officials have been reluctant to do is to advocate for regime change in Russia. That's kind of a third rail they haven't wanted to touch. But the president, in his speech here in Warsaw, appeared to go right at that in what seemed like an off-the-cuff remark. Right towards the end of his address, he said, for God's sakes, this man cannot remain in power, referring to Vladimir Putin. Well, that sounded to a lot of people, including the Russians, like he was advocating for regime change in Russia. And very quickly, the Russians put out a statement saying that's not up to President Biden, that's up to the people of the Russian Federation. And sure enough, within a few minutes, we were getting a walk back from a top White House official saying that the president wasn't talking about regime change in Russia. All he was trying to say was that Vladimir Putin couldn't exert this kind of power over his neighbors. So a little bit of cleanup there at the end of a very long day here in Warsaw.
Wow. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much.